In December 1992, in Greater Manchester, England, 16-year-old Suzanne Capper became the victim of one of the most harrowing acts of cruelty ever recorded in modern British criminal history. What began as minor accusations between acquaintances spiraled into a week-long campaign of torture that would end in fire, suffering, and death. Suzanne was not kidnapped by strangers in the dark, nor targeted by an unknown predator. She was destroyed by people she once trusted, people she called friends. Suzanne Capper was vulnerable, isolated, and desperate for acceptance. She struggled socially and emotionally, drifting between groups and often relying on those who offered her attention, even when that attention was harmful. In the winter of 1992, she became entangled with a group led primarily by Bernadette McNeely and Jean Powell. The group accused Suzanne of spreading head lice and stealing a jacket, claims that, even if true, did not justify what followed. These petty grievances became the justification for an unrestrained eruption of sadism. In early December, Suzanne was lured to a house in Mostown under false pretenses. Once inside, the doors closed and the nightmare began. Her captors stripped her of autonomy immediately. Her hair was forcibly shaved. Her eyebrows were removed. These acts were not merely physical. They were symbolic, designed to erase her identity and humiliate her completely. Over the next 7 days, Suzanne was held captive, beaten repeatedly, deprived of sleep, threatened, mocked, and degraded. The violence escalated daily. She was punched, kicked, burned, and psychologically tormented. Members of the group took turns abusing her while others watched. Some laughed, some encouraged it. The house became a chamber of cruelty where pain was entertainment and empathy no longer existed. Suzanne was forced to endure this torture while being told she deserved it, that she was worthless, that no one would come for her. Despite the brutality, Suzanne survived the week. By mid-December, her captors grew afraid, not of what they had done, but of being caught. They feared that her disappearance would be reported and that police would begin asking questions. Rather than release her or seek help, they chose to silence her permanently. On December 14, 1992, Suzanne was forced into a stolen car. She was weak, injured, and barely able to resist. The group drove her to a remote area near Werneth Low, an isolated stretch of countryside outside Manchester. There, the decision was made to burn her alive. Petrol was poured over Suzanne's body. She was set on fire and left to die. The group believed that would be the end of it. They were wrong. Suzanne did not die immediately. Somehow, despite burns covering approximately 80% of her body, she managed to escape the flames. Disoriented, in agony, and partially blind, she stumbled through woodland toward Compstall Road. Her skin was severely damaged. Her pain was unimaginable, yet she walked. Eventually, she collapsed near the roadside, where workers discovered her and called for emergency services. Suzanne was rushed to Withington Hospital in Manchester. Doctors fought to save her, but the injuries were catastrophic. Even so, Suzanne did something extraordinary. Before slipping into a coma, Suzanne spoke to police. Through unimaginable pain, she identified her attackers by name. She described what had been done to her and who was responsible. Her testimony would become the cornerstone of the case. On December 18, 1992, 4 days after being set on fire, Suzanne Capper died from multiple organ failure caused by her burns. She was 16 years old. The investigation that followed revealed the full scale of the cruelty inflicted upon her. 6 individuals were arrested: Bernadette McNeely, Jean Powell, Glenn Powell, Anthony Dudson, Jeffrey Lee, and Clifford Pook. The evidence painted a horrifying picture of collective violence and shared responsibility. At trial, the court heard how Suzanne had been systematically tortured for days. Witnesses described beatings, humiliation, and deliberate attempts to break her spirit. The prosecution argued that this was not a momentary loss of control, but a sustained campaign of abuse fueled by cruelty, group dynamics, and dehumanization. Bernadette McNeely, Jean Powell, Glenn Powell, and Anthony Dudson were convicted of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. Jeffrey Lee and Clifford Pook were convicted of false imprisonment. The sentences reflected the severity of the crime, but for many members of the public, no punishment could ever balance what Suzanne endured. The case shocked Britain. Media coverage was intense, not only because of the brutality, but because of the ages of those involved and the sheer absence of remorse shown by some of the perpetrators. Suzanne's murder became a symbol of extreme peer violence and the dangers of unchecked group cruelty. Years later, controversy reignited when some of the convicted individuals were considered for parole. Public outrage followed. Many believe that anyone capable of such sustained torture should never be released. Suzanne's name resurfaced in headlines, reminding the country of what had happened and reigniting questions about justice, punishment, and forgiveness. Suzanne Capper's case forced a national conversation about vulnerability, social neglect, and how easily cruelty can flourish when empathy disappears. It highlighted how young people, when driven by power, resentment, and group reinforcement, can commit acts as horrifying as any adult offender. More than 3 decades later, Suzanne is remembered not only for the way she died, but for what she did in her final moments. Despite unimaginable suffering, she named her attackers. She refused to let them disappear into anonymity. Her courage ensured accountability. Her story remains one of the most disturbing true crime cases in British history. Not because it involved a complex conspiracy or an elusive killer, but because it showed how ordinary people can become monsters when cruelty is normalized and silence is accepted. Suzanne Capper did not survive, but her voice did, and it continues to echo as a warning of what happens when compassion fails and violence is allowed to grow unchecked.